So good morning, Tony.
Morning to you, Tiff.
I see you're wearing a Christian Aid vest. You're doing something maybe a little bit unusual for the month of May. Would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, I suppose the background to it is that the diocese gave a commitment to Christian Aid to fund the project for 3 years initially, and then to continue it for 3 further years. Unfortunately, the 3 further years were 2020, 2021, and 2022. And the commitment, I'll talk to you what it's about in a moment in terms of the project. But in terms of the finance, we probably got through 2020 mainly with a surplus from 2019 before the lockdown. But the target, what we said we would give to this project for what they were trying to achieve, was €20,000 in this year. So I contacted the diocesan secretary to discover there was a grand total of 3,000 there, which was totally understandable given the
Nobody's
lockdown.
able to do fundraising events or.
So I felt we needed to do something a bit extra rather than just the usual. So I contacted Andrew Coleman and I said to him that I was willing to do a 5K walk every day at home in Carrigaline. And Andrew suddenly decided if I was willing to do a 5K walk, he had a better idea. And that is that I would do it in every parish in the diocese.
So where have you started and where have you been so far?
We started on the 1st of May. The intention is to do it all during the month of May, because in the middle of May you have Christian Aid Week. So my concept was I would start at the west and end at the east. We started in Durras on the 1st of May, and in the same day we were in Skull. And then later on we went to Ballydehob and Abbeystrury, and we're broadly on a movement west to east.
Right.
Broadly, there are some exceptions. Everybody that I've been with insisted that I have a minimum of 5K. There's no slippage allowed.
Very good. And tell us a little bit more about the project, because I mean, we probably have heard about it before, but we forget these things. So
yeah, I think the project is unique. And what I mean by unique is that of all the dioceses in the Church of Ireland, it seems to be the only one that took a particular area in the south, in this case, in the south of Burundi. It took 3 cooperatives, and it's basically trying to get them from a state where people were in subsistence farming, that at the end of a 6-year period, that they're self-sufficient. So what the project had to address, and I should say it was through the Anglican Church in Burundi. I mean, there was none of the funding went through government. It went through people who were on the ground. And indeed, we had the Archbishop of Burundi in St. Finbarr's in 2017. And I was in Burundi in 2019. But essentially, it's a country where there is a very high density of population. The average family size is 5 or 6, but there's a huge shortage of land. The average farm is less than 2 acres. Wow. So effectively, the combination of things you had, unless somebody intervened, it couldn't change. You had people just growing and not necessarily growing the best crops, mainly cassava, to feed their families. They couldn't raise any money, therefore they couldn't expand, they couldn't develop. And it's a sort of a catch-22 situation. So that's why I thought this is a good project, in that the commitment was, first of all, to buy extra land, because obviously they didn't have the resources. Different to the Irish cooperative system 100 years ago, the land is owned by the cooperative, and the people, while working on their own little holdings, also work on the farms. So that was the first thing. They got land, they could grow crops. The second thing was, rather than growing cassava, which is very poor nutritional value, they grew maize. And then you have a series of steps after that, which were more than halfway through. The first thing, which would be very taken for granted in Ireland, was to give them a storage facility. Because if they didn't have a storage facility, they had to sell the harvest on the day they harvested, regardless of price. And then the second thing was to add value. And by adding value, basically meant to take the maize and process it and turn it into flour. Because in a simple equation, we got 4 times more money for the flour than for the maize itself. And then they're moving on further than that, and they're getting qualified by the agricultural department as having a quality product. So they could not only sell flour, but they could sell the seed to other cooperatives. And then they're trying to market outside their area. So it's a gradual series of steps. And hopefully by 2022, it will be sufficiently established that they'll have land, they'll be able to repay loans and develop from there on themselves. So it's not an emergency funding, it's a development funding.
Yeah, that sounds really intriguing. And I know a lot of the people watching this morning will be farmers and they really will relate to it. How can somebody here assist in that project?
Well, as I said, for a small diocese, relatively speaking, the commitment to raise 20,000 a year is not insignificant. If you take that there's about 10,000 members of the church, but then not everybody is in a position to contribute. So this particular walk, the idea of walking through every parish, I suppose has the concept coming out of the lockdown of reawakening interest, because obviously we're very much observed by ourselves when we had so many deaths and such a spread of cases. But this would give a kickstart to the funding, and hopefully by the end of the year, with harvest and other things at the other end of the year, we'll be able to honor the commitment, because it's not like if we don't honor it, it doesn't affect us because we just didn't get the money. But obviously it has an impact on the people who had plans to utilize that money. So I suppose prayer, which is always, very much in any situation, but very much Christian Aid, will always distinguish themselves from other agencies by having prayer as a key part of their approach. And then aid to people who are trying to help themselves.
Tony, that sounds fantastic. And there's a question I want to ask you though. Why are you doing this? Like, what's your motive?
What's my motive? I think all my life, the concept of justice has always, been with me. I mean, when I was born in 1951, much earlier than you, Cliff, but in 1968, there was a war in Nigeria, which was called the Biafran War. And from that, helping the people in the eastern part of Nigeria, a group of Irish people set up an organization called Concern, which was called Biafra Concern at the time. And that awakened my interest in the developing world. In the 70s, I spent 2 years in Sierra Leone, working with Concern at the time. And I suppose, unfortunately, in the middle area, when you're working and raising a family, the focus drifted a bit. But in more recent years, I have been sort of much more committed again. And Andrew asked me in 2019 if I would represent the diocese. So I suppose by representing the diocese on a trip to Burundi, I felt very much a moral responsibility to try and get us to the end line on this project, Right. But basically the concept of justice and, seeing the world as one.
So Tony, would you like to finish up with a prayer for us with regard to the work of Christian Aid?
I would. The Christian Aid Week is actually next week, and there is a devotional book here, and I just chose one prayer from one day on it, and it comes back right to the question of justice that we've been talking about. So God, who spoke stars into being, challenge, awaken, and inspire us to raise our voices with the cry of the earth, the prophets throughout history, and the prophets of today in our call for justice. Amen.
Amen. Tony, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Cliff, and thank you for your support.
You're welcome, and we look forward to walking with you next Saturday. Cheerio.
Thanks very much, Cliff. Take care.
Bye.